a couple of days ago, Donald Trump scheduled something called Liberation Day. And Liberation Day was when he announced exceptionally high tariffs, a 10% baseline plus extra tariffs from many countries. And Taiwan was hit with a 32% tariff rate. How that was calculated, we're not really sure. Okay, it's not a very simple formula. It seems to be a bit ad hoc of how the number 32% was picked out.
To say the period between April 3rd to April 10th were chaotic for Taiwan businesses is an understatement. Like Japan, the European Union, Vietnam, India, and South Korea, Taiwan's manufacturing sector was given 7 days to respond to a shotgun 32% tariff increase imposed by the Trump administration. Manufacturers like Jean Chung, founder of All Good Jeans Kombucha, makes products that would have been covered by the levy. I caught up with Jean hours before the tariffs were set to take effect.
Well, we can't really do too much because the cost is already there for the manufacturing. So all the materials it's already incurred, right? So, I mean, for the food, we're not making triple-digit profits, right? Everything is very, very still 很可怜呢. So especially at the factory side, we are maybe operating at like maybe 10 to 15% margin. So with 32%, we'll be losing money if we're going to use the same price structure, right? So this is going to pass on to the customers for sure. And then as big retailers, they will come back and trying to get a lower price from the manufacturing side. So basically, it's like a lose-lose situation. Our stuff is going to be more expensive by 30%, and then if it's not passed on to the customer, we're not going to be able to operate then, right? Everything has a ceiling. Right? I mean, and then soy sauce although it's in big quantities, in the U.S. There's a lot of other alternatives brands, so I'm sure we're gonna get impacted.
Okay, when we say foodstuffs are going to be impacted, are we talking about foodstuffs in general or just specific types of foods?
Oh, no, it just in general, like anything, like cookies, okay, snacks, sauces, different sauces, noodles, okay, because we're not really sure how it's going to be implemented. Is it going to be taxed on when it gets to stateside, or is it going to be like an export tax? It's not really clear right now. I think it's just everybody's in like kind of panic mode.
Okay, so hang on a minute. It's meant to kick in at noon today, right? Which is
Yeah,
midnight U.S. time.
right.
How does this work if you guys aren't sure of how if it's going to pan
Well,
out?
so it's like there's stuff that's already on the way already, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, like, I don't know. I mean, like, it's like containers are still going to go into the States. Are they going to start like, okay, this is coming in right now, so we're going to tax it right now? It's kind of like there's no preparation. There's nothing, right? We're very passive about it because there's nothing we could do about it, right? And then you could lobby towards the Taiwan government, right, to bargain some more, but I don't think there's any bargaining chips or any leverage that Taiwan has.
Well, it's not just Taiwan, though. It's all the food industries around the world, right? I
Oh
mean,
yeah, yeah. It's basically, and because it's more of a. In the beginning, what we thought was maybe it was like more towards China, right? Because of the political tension. Okay, but now you're doing this global taxation. It's kind of, I think it's out of control. I don't think, in my opinion, it's not good for the consumers in the state side. Okay, you're just going to be paying more for the same stuff.
wow.
And then, but obviously he's trying to encourage people to manufacture in the state. But some things are not that easy because all the costs in the U.S. is higher.
Now, Taiwan may be best known for its semiconductors, but it has other industries too. Professor J.L. Zargoski is an associate professor at the Questrom School of Business at Boston University and author of The Power of Cash.
So let me say, Hope, there's really two issues here. And Taiwan, as I mentioned in my article, is being squeezed by two superpowers. On one side, it's being squeezed by China. On the other side, it's being squeezed by the United States. And both are very problematic for Taiwan. China is looking to squeeze it militarily. The United States is looking to squeeze it economically. Taiwan is very important to the United States for three big areas. Number one, as almost everybody knows, high tech. Taiwan produces a lot of chips, and not only the highest level chips. I was in Taiwan in November, and I had a chat over dinner with somebody who's making low-level resistors, low-level capacitors. You know, some of the basic building blocks that go into making all of our electronic gear. And he was very apologetic. Oh, I don't make, high-tech chips. I don't make, the CPUs or things like that. But I was like, these things are just as important because while the brains of a computer might be the processing unit, you can't do things with just your brain, right? You need your arms, you need your legs, you need your feet in order to propel your body forward. And it's the same thing with computers. You need all different types of products to go into things. But while everybody focuses on high tech, Taiwan is very important to the United States in other industries. One, the building industry is extremely reliant on Taiwan in two areas. First, Taiwan makes a lot of the tools that the building industry uses. Well over half of all the tools that are metal tools that are used in the US building industry come from Taiwan. Taiwan really has a lock on that market. But the even bigger lock on the market is something that almost no one thinks about. Here in the United States, we build a lot of buildings and we put up a lot of something called sheetrock or drywall. It's basically these plain white boards that people paint over, they attach art to, all different kind of things. It's sort of the interiors of all buildings. And we produce a lot of sheetrock, a lot of drywall. Sheetrock is just a brand name. Drywall is sort of the generic name. And we produce so much that every single year the country produces enough to cover the state of Rhode Island, which is one of the 50 states. And in order to put that drywall up, to hang it up, it takes for every roughly 100 feet of drywall, 125 sheetrock screws. And where do almost all those sheetrock screws come from? All the high-end screws come from Taiwan, which basically means that if Taiwan can't export the sheetrock screws, then the US building industry is going to come to a halt. Now, the US does produce screws. Basically you can take wire, in particular steel, you can put a thread on it, then you heat it. But Taiwan really produces very particular screws for the US, holding up sheetrock. The US screw industry produces screws for things like aircrafts, rocket ships, other really, really high-tech, high expensive screws, while Taiwan sort of has the middle of the market. And for the cheap screws, that's what China does. China produces some of the cheapest screws available. There's a couple of other industries that are really important from Taiwan to the United States. Bicycles. Taiwan, giant bicycle, by its name, is a giant bicycle corporation. It produces a lot of bikes, but here in the United States, a lot of our parts for bikes come from Taiwan. Brakes, derailleurs, which provide the shifting for bicycles, brakes, derailleurs, cranks, which enable you to pedal. Almost all of those come from Taiwan. Taiwan has, somewhere between 66 and 80% of market, depending on which type of bicycle part we're looking at. So for people who pedal, who commute to work by bicycle here in the United States, the loss of Taiwan could basically mean the end of their pedaling around. Taiwan's also very important for the golf industry. It produces a lot of the golf balls used in the United States, a lot of the shafts for clubs, a lot of the club faces. So the golfing industry would be really hurt in the United States. And Taiwan does a couple of other really small things that people would notice if Taiwan could not export to the United States. A lot of our tilapia, which is a type of fish, come from Taiwan. Basically, Taiwan has sort of a lock on the tilapia market. Now, people could switch to other types of fish, but tilapia is a fish that is enjoyed quite extensively here in the United States, especially by the restaurant industry when they're looking for a relatively low-cost fish that they can perform culinary magic to. And what do I mean by culinary magic? Tilapia doesn't have a particularly strong scent or taste, so you can sort of make it your own fish, unlike some other fishes which the fish taste comes through and it's very hard to mask or do something with. Orchids. Um, Many of our live orchids, vast majority come just from Taiwan, not from other countries. So Taiwan is really, really important to the United States in a couple of key places where the US consumer would notice. As a business school professor, if Taiwanese executives were in my class today, I would recommend a couple of things. First, Donald Trump has eliminated the high level of tariffs, but he kept on the 10% for all countries. So tariff rates have gone up. Things are going to be more expensive importing them from Taiwan and from other countries, no matter what. They're just not going to be like ridiculously expensive, the tariff rates. First, you have 90 days, and the president is really trying to encourage people to shift manufacturing operations to the United States. Um, I think for some manufacturers, it would be useful to move some capacity, not all their capacity, but a little bit of capacity. 90 days is enough to sort of dismantle, say, some screw manufacturing factories and move some of the key parts, the expensive parts, maybe to a location in the United States, especially if those parts aren't really being completely used in Taiwan. The second thing I would suggest is looking for other markets. All right, that the idea that the US is sort of this behemoth that is always willing to accept Taiwanese parts, I don't think is a good assumption for executives anymore. That maybe it's time to pivot to Europe or Africa or maybe other parts of Asia. I'm not 100% sure where the optimal market is. I have not studied, Taiwanese connections to the rest of the world or where Taiwan does exports to, only to the United States. Um, Africa is actually a growing market, and my students and I have been spending a fair amount of time looking at where, the next 100 years are going to be. And it seems pretty clear from demographic reasons, Africa is the next frontier. Exploding income, exploding population. Yes, a lot of political instability, but I think you could say that about the United States right now. Now, let me say this two parts. I recently published a book. So this book came out about 6 days ago. It's called The Power of Cash, Why Using Paper Money is Good for You and Society. And it talks about a lot of different things in the book. But one of the particular chapters and why I am an advocate for using paper money, cash, is that there is national defense reasons for continuing to use cash. When I was in Taiwan, I remember going to numerous stores and there would be a placard with somewhere between 16 and 20 different electronic ways to pay. Right. And then I would pull out paper money and they would be like, okay, I guess we can accept paper money, and they would handle it. Um, from the United States point of view, then what you need to be doing is thinking about other markets, as I said, or maybe putting some manufacturing capability in the United States so the profits could flow back to Taiwan and still keep the economy going. From a military point of view, there are many ways of hurting a country, not just Taiwan. Physical blockades can stop economic activity, but also can, in an all-electronic society, also can hacking stop. If outside governments try and shut down the banking system and all those electronic means of payments fail, then it's impossible to buy food. It's impossible to buy fuel. It's impossible to take care of medical care. Paper money is immune to hacking by foreign entities. It is a very simple, low-tech way. Oftentimes the way to fight high-tech interventions is by going as low-tech as possible. So what I really recommend in the book is that all countries, not just Taiwan, but all places should use, or all people should use cash at least once a week. By keeping it in circulation, it's not just something for an emergency. It enables people to handle what's going on whenever people need to use cash. It means by using it once a week, you have cash available when or if a problem shows up. And it's not just for national defense. Taiwan suffers from a large number of earthquakes. When earthquakes happen, cell towers go down, the communication system is disrupted, And you can't make electronic payments when the electricity network fails and when the communication network fails. But cash works no matter what happens. And that means in the very moment when you need to use payments, cash comes through and you can't depend on electronic means. 30-second, two personal stories. I just got my hair cut a few moments ago, and they accept cash and Venmo. Venmo is a sort of instant payment system. And the lady in front of me was just getting extremely frustrated. She pulled out her phone, she had a Venmo account, and for some reason the phone wasn't connecting to the Venmo server. And she and I stood there for 5 minutes. I was waiting to pay, and she was in front of me. And she was like, "I'm sorry." She's getting really upset. She can't pay. Well, I pulled out some paper money, put it on the counter. I smiled. The lady nodded at me. I walked out the door. Right? But the reason I push really hard that people should use cash, not just in emergencies, is I was in one of the local supermarkets about 2 weeks ago, and I was supposed to get 40 cents US change. And the lady didn't understand the difference between nickels, 5 cents, and dimes, 10 cents. And the
Wow.
head cashier had to come over and explain it to her. And she was like, well, I don't know, I don't make change. People just pull out their phones or they tap their cards and they go. So what we need is that lady needs to experience cash, say 10 or 20 times a day, 10 or 20 times a shift, so that she knows, okay, the lights are going out, or heaven forbid, there's a war going on. She's trained. She knows what the difference is to make change. So I think from the Chinese perspective, I would really push using cash more often. And I'm happy to do a totally separate story on this. From a US perspective on tariffs, from resilience, I think the two big things are looking for other markets, sort of a 90-day reprieve, but also thinking a little bit about sort of giving in to what the Trump organization wants, which is potentially shifting some, not all, but some of the manufacturing to the US market. Because what Taiwan really cares about is bringing profits back to the Taiwan people, right?
While Taiwan uses a grace period to try and negotiate with the U.S. government, one businessman I spoke to on the ground says he's using the time to figure out his next moves that he hopes will save his business and the businesses of the people he works with in the United States. For Taiwan Talk, I'm Hope Go.